Hi, everyone. Welcome to Are You Ready to Apply to Vet School? This is for the 2026-2027 application cycle. My name is Rachel Hall. I'm the Vet School Admissions Advisor at Galin Education, and I will be presenting today. To give you a little info about me, my background is in pre-health advising. I worked as a pre-health advisor for many years at University of Illinois, Chicago. I also worked at Midwestern University with first-year students in their professional healthcare programs, which gave me a unique perspective outside of just the admissions process, but also what that first year can look like. And I like to weave that into my advising as well. Since joining Galin Education, I've narrowed in my focus and now solely work with pre-vet students and pre-PA students. This is my third admission cycle with Galin Education, and I've really enjoyed my time working with students that I meet through Galin. We're going to get started today. My goal for today is to help you understand what the vet application cycle looks like, and so that you can assess if you are ready to apply this cycle. Today I'm going to give you just some quick facts, some info about the cycle. We're going to go through the timeline and an application overview. I'll get a little more into detail about some specifics about the timeline and the application as well. I'm going to go through some questions and things for you to consider as a potential applicant to help you decide if you should apply this cycle. I'll go through some resources and then address some common questions. So some quick facts, some things to take into account when you're thinking about if you should apply. The application process is a year-long application process. It is long. You want to make sure that you feel that you are the most competitive applicant you can be before you decide to apply. Not only does it take a full year, so you're applying a year ahead of when you would actually be entering vet school, it's costly. It's a lot of time, money, and energy. So I really encourage applicants to apply when they're most competitive. I tend to advise against the idea of, well, maybe I'll just apply to a couple schools and see how it goes. And I'll get into this more towards the end of the presentation about being a reapplicant and what that means. But try to apply when you feel the most competitive. Gap years. A lot of applicants I work with have a little bit of a negative thought process around gap years. Gap years are okay and often encouraged. For those of you not familiar with what a gap year is, it would be taking a year or two off from the time that you finish undergrad to the point of applying for vet school. Gap years are excellent times to continue to build vet hours and experience and gain a more holistic understanding of the field, to work on your GPA, to complete prerequisites, to gain additional experience, volunteer work. Gap years are actually often encouraged, and we tend to see that applicants who take that time and really make sure that they are a competitive applicant often have higher admissions rates. GPA, this is probably what I get asked the most as a vet school advisor. What GPA do I need to be considered competitive? And the answer is not straightforward. Schools are going to look at multiple GPAs. So it's important that when you're thinking about your GPA, you're not just thinking about what your overall or cumulative is. You need to also be pulling out what is your science GPA, your prerequisite GPA. Some schools are going to focus specifically on your last 30 credit hours or your last 45 credit hours. So it's important to do your research and know the schools that you're planning to apply to. What GPAs are they looking at? What are your GPAs? And are they competitive? With that being said, I would say the average accepted cumulative range, so this means every class you've ever taken, usually falls somewhere between a 3.3 to 3.8, but most schools, I would say the majority, fall within around the 3.5 to 3.7 range. So I generally recommend, as much as you can, aiming for a 3.5 or higher for all of your GPAs. However, GPA is not everything. You need to prove that you can do the work, that you can be successful in upper level science classes. But things like an upward trend in your GPA are going to be important as well. Outside of GPA, experience is vitally important. This is probably the second most common question I get asked. What are they looking for experience-wise? They're looking for, number one, vet hours, right? Under the supervision of a vet. They need to know that you know what you're getting into, that you have a comprehensive and holistic understanding of the field, that you understand the good parts, the bad parts, the frustrating or sad parts of the job. So with vet hours, most schools will list a minimum number that they want you to have. I would say to be competitive, you're going to need to be well over that number. I generally advise my applicants have somewhere around at least 1,000 hours of experience in 2 to 3 different settings. Specifically, if you have an area that you know you want to work in, so let's say you know you want to be an equine vet, you need to have some equine vet hours. It's going to be a red flag if you're saying in your application that you know you want to be an equine vet and then you have no equine vet related experience. So make sure that you have experience in the area that you're looking to go into. And if you're not sure what area you want to go into, that's also okay. I think aiming for around at least 1,000 hours in 2 to 3 settings can set you up to be able to speak to the field in things like your personal statement, your essays, your interviews. Outside of vet hours, they're looking for people who have leadership, that have a lot of animal related experience, handling care. Volunteer work, showing a commitment to serving others in your community is going to be important because as a veterinarian, you're going to be serving a community. Research, paid work experience, community and school involvement, and experience working with people who are different from you. Okay, and I'm not saying you need to have something in every single one of these categories, but having a good mix of experiences that help show them who you are, I think can be really beneficial. Lastly, and this is, I would argue, one of the most important aspects of your application, you need to know your why and how you want to contribute. Why are you going into this field and how do you want to contribute as a future veterinarian? This needs to go beyond just wanting to work with animals, that you have a love of animals, that you've always been an animal person. You really need to dig deeper than that to figure out, why this field? Why do you want to be a vet and how are you going to contribute both in vet school as well as to the field as a whole? Finally, exams. Only one U.S. school currently still requires the GRE, so a lot of applicants don't end up needing to take that. CASPER is the second exam that you might see. I would say more and more vet schools are using CASPER. It's a situational judgment exam. Something to look into as you're making your list of vet schools that you want to apply to so that you can plan accordingly to take that if needed. All right, so this is our application timeline overview, and I'm going to go more into depth on each of these in the next few slides, but I wanted to give you big picture first. The months listed at the top are kind of the big ticket months, I would say, to have on your radar. January is always when the new VEMCAS cycle opens, so this current cycle just opened on January 21st. You can open the application, start exploring, and actually start filling out certain components of the application. Now in January, February, it's a good time to confirm your school list. You're going to see that prereqs may differ very slightly school to school. It's good to have that list confirmed so that you can plan accordingly. I always say start working on your personal statement early. In my work with applicants, most take somewhere between 4 to 6 drafts before they have a final piece that they're ready to submit. It's a process. Starting early can really take some pressure off later on. So I would say that can be a good thing to get started now. Also confirming any GRE or CASPER testing requirements. Come May, Your program materials section opens, so that's when you can start selecting the schools you want to apply to and filling out the school specific essays and application materials. May is also a good time once you've finished your spring semester or quarter and grades are posted to start the transcript entry section. In August, ideally, we want to submit early to mid-August. We don't want to wait till the final deadline, which is in September. Come October through April, that's where you're going to have interviews, decisions come out. Mid-April, April 15th every year is the date that you have to commit if you're holding multiple acceptances. And then in April is when we really start to see waitlist moving. So big picture, I would say plan ahead. May through August, I would say tend to be the most busy months application wise. So good things to consider, like if you're thinking about studying abroad or working, you're definitely going to want to build in a decent amount of time to be working on your application. All right, let's narrow in a little bit and talk a little bit more in depth about this timeline. So January, February of application year. So if you are applying this cycle, right now you should be researching schools and creating your school list. I've got some resources here, the VEMSAR, school websites. These are great places to kind of dig into what's needed to apply to the schools. VEMSAR is also great in looking up what was the average accepted GPAs, what's considered in their admissions process. Having a solid list of schools so that you can plan accordingly. And to my second point here, confirming prerequisites and a timeline to complete those. Most schools, with a couple exceptions, allow you to have 1 to 2 outstanding prerequisites at the time of application. But you're going to have to make sure that you're able to complete your prereqs in time, usually by the end of the spring semester before you would matriculate. So you're going to find different schools have slightly different prerequisites. Some may require like a public speaking class or to have a different number of humanities requirements, or some might want microbio and biochem or genetics. So confirming your prereqs early, for the schools that you're applying to can help take some stress off later if you have a plan to complete them in time. According to VEMCAS, applicants applied to 5 to 6 schools on average last cycle. In my experience, I would say applicants I work with, it tends to be a little bit higher, probably like 8 to 10 schools, but it's very dependent on several factors, including your comfort level, right? Where do your credentials fall? Your GPA, your vet hours, your volunteer work, your overall experiences and life experiences. Time, money. These are all things that I talk to my applicants about to figure out what's going to be a good number of schools for you to apply to. Now is a good time to start the open sections of the application. Chipping away at it, I find tends to be a less stressful way to approach it than kind of holding off and trying to do it all at once. So being that VEMCAS is open, create your account, start looking at the application, start completing the sections that you can. This is what your dashboard is going to look like. They actually rolled out a new application format this cycle. This is what it looks like. So you've got 4 quadrants: personal information, academic history, supporting information, and then program materials in the bottom right. That's the one that won't open till May. That's where you will select your schools that you want to apply to in the essays for the schools. The first 3 quadrants are currently open. So your personal information, that's where you're going to have your biographical and contact information, background information, your explanation statement, which is an optional essay that you can write that basically explains anything that is not going to be elsewhere in the application. So this could be used to explain a semester where you earn poor grades. It could be you had a leave of absence. It could be going into more detail about a specific experience that you really want them to know about. The second quadrant is your academic history, where you're going to put in your high schools, your colleges, your transcript entry. Transcript entry, wait until your spring grades have posted before you request your transcripts. The transcript entry is a tedious and time-consuming process. You are literally transcribing what is on your official transcript into the application system. And I highly recommend that you order yourself official copies of transcripts so that you make sure you are copying in what the schools will see. Supporting information, so your personal statement, which I have highlighted in yellow and put a star by. I can't stress enough how important it is to get this started early. They actually changed the prompt this year. This year, it's a little bit more focused on how you want to contribute as a future veterinarian, and also about your experiences that have led you to vet school. Start this early. It takes, as I mentioned, usually 4 to 6 drafts. And a lot of applicants end up changing their direction partway through. It's a lot to communicate in a short number of characters. And it definitely takes some work and a lot of revising. So starting this early can be really helpful. The personal statement is probably the thing that I spend the most time working with applicants that I work with on. It can be tough to get started. You have to write in a way that I think a lot of students aren't used to. It's a very direct and professional form of writing. So start this early. Your letters of recommendation are also in this section. You will be requesting letters of recommendation directly through VMCAS, where you will be inputting your letter writer's information, saving it, and then the system will send them a request. Your experiences. This is the section where you're going to be inputting your vet hours, your animal hours, your volunteer work, your paid work experiences, all of that. For each experience, you have up to 600 characters to describe that experience. A couple important things with the experiences. I generally recommend that you do a line that talks about what you did, what you learned, and why it was meaningful. They want to know beyond just what you did. If you've worked as a vet tech, they know what a vet tech does, right? Focus more so on the highlights of what you did and then what was meaningful about the experience and like what you learned or what you gained from the experience. That's what they're most interested in. Achievements and certifications. And then, as I mentioned, program materials will open in May. So we're going to transition in our timeline now to like May through September of the application year. So program materials is going to be a little bit dependent on how many schools that you decide to apply to. Come May, you can start adding the schools that you want to apply to. And as you can see on the screen, they will be in a listed format. When you click on one of the schools, it will open up and then show you what additional steps they want you to complete. Most will have a series of questions for you to answer and then additional essays. I tell my applicants you can expect to have to do anywhere from like 3 to 5 additional essays per school that you're applying to. In addition, some schools also have an additional supplemental application through their school website that you will want to complete as well. Come October through April of the application year, that is when interviews will start. Not all schools offer interviews, but for the ones that do, the earliest ones usually are like October, November, and they usually wrap up around March. They can be in-person, virtual, it can be a traditional style interview, an MMI, it just depends on the school. As an advisor, I offer mock interviews, which I think is a really, it can offer a really good experience to kind of get some of the jitters out, to practice talking out loud and answering a question kind of under stress. Highly recommend mock interviews, whether it's through Galin, whether it's through, your university, to get prepared for the interviews, because you'll find, especially if you end up with multiple interviews, it's likely that they're going to be different types of interviews. Decisions come out on a rolling basis, October through April. If you're holding multiple acceptances, you do have to commit by April, and then we see wait lists start to move quite a bit. Ultimately, you can receive a decision up until the day before classes start, which can be stressful, but know that it can happen. Schools vary widely on how they handle wait lists and also what information they'll share about wait lists. It's a question I get often, and it really just depends on the school. I highly recommend, if you're not accepted, that you request a file review with the school, where they will go through and tell you what areas they would like to see you build on before applying again. Also, keeping in mind, sometimes it comes down to purely a numbers game. There are significantly more applicants than there are seats. According to AAVMC's annual data report for the 2024-2025, there were 10,800 applicants for 4,278 seats. So there's simply just not enough seats for everyone that wants to go to vet school. And sometimes you can have done everything correctly, and it really comes down to a numbers game. So I think it's really good to do a file review if you're not accepted, so that you can have some targeted areas to work on before you reapply. And it's also a good time to engage an advisor if that's an option for you. I've worked with several students who have applied 2 or 3 times, and we review essays. We kind of go through their application bit by bit, and work on things. And a lot of times they are successful after that. So sometimes it's nice to have another set of eyes on things, to get advice on how to say things in your essays, prepare for interviews. Those are all things that we can help with as advisors. All right, so now we're at the point where, are you ready to apply this cycle? Some things to think about. If you are a first-time applicant, meaning you have not applied to vet school in the past, things that I would want you to think about, and kind of questions to answer. Are your prerequisites completed or near completed? As I mentioned, there are a few exceptions to this, but most vet schools will allow you to apply with like 1 to 2. Some will allow 3 uncompleted prerequisites. I tend to be of the mindset, the more prerequisites you've completed, the better. The more holistic view they have of you as a student, the better. Where are your GPAs at? Okay, are they considered competitive? Your cumulative, your science, your last 30, your last 45, your prerequisite GPAs. And do you have an upward trend? Maybe your first year or first couple years of college didn't go well academically, but since that you've been on an upward trend. Those are things they're going to be looking at. So I would take a good look at where you're at academically, and if you to be a competitive applicant, we want to aim for a 3.5 or above, but as I said, GPA is not everything, and I've worked with many applicants that have below a 3.5, because there's other things that are important to consider. But you also need to show that you can handle the coursework. So completing upper level science classes and completing them successfully is going to be really important step in showing vet schools that you'll be able to handle the rigor of the classes in vet school. I tend to say, imagine like your 4 to 5 hardest classes that you've ever taken. You're going to be likely taking all of those together your first year of vet school. So you really need to have a solid academic footing, well-established study skills, know how you learn. These things are all important. Experiences, where are you at with vet hours, animal hours, community service and volunteer work, extracurriculars, leadership? If you would say you are low in any of these areas, it may be something you want to consider building up before you decide to apply. Know and articulate your why and how you want to contribute. This is vitally important, especially for your personal statement, your essays, and your interviews. You have to know why you're going into this field, and it has to go beyond just a love of animals or knowing that you've always wanted to do this your whole life or that you want to help, the voiceless. Those are things they hear all the time. You need to dig deeper. Okay. What about vets specifically, right? It's more than just working with animals. It's working with the people associated with those animals. It's having to make really tough decisions and have some hard conversations. It is science. It is a science and research based practice. So show them that you understand the field, and be able to really dig down and articulate why this field. How do you want to contribute as a future veterinarian? Things they're going to be looking for: compassion, strong communication skills, reliability, professionalism. And this is just a small list, but you're going to need to show, right, that you embody these qualities through your different experiences and being able to talk about those and have specific examples to pull from. So for example, if you can't think of a time that you served as a leader, or a time that you had to have a difficult conversation with somebody, these are things I would reflect on, and think about ways you could maybe engage in some of these things to help better prepare yourself for this application process and to be successful, right? That's ultimately, they want to accept applicants they feel are going to be successful in their program. Finally, and this is something that I think a lot of applicants kind of overlook sometimes. This is an emotionally, mentally, educationally, physically, financially draining process. I have yet to work with an applicant who says at the end of this, "Oh yeah, that was great. Not, would love to do it again." It's a lot, and it's a full year of this. So making sure that you are emotionally ready, mentally ready, educationally, physically, financially, that kind of all your ducks are in a row. Because I can tell you, if you're struggling in any of these ways, this process is going to be tough. So really make sure you're doing what you need to do, to kind of put your best foot forward, to feel as prepared as possible. As I mentioned, it is a really competitive process, and our goal is always to apply one time. So make sure you're ready. Don't, if you feel like, I don't, there's some areas in my application that are maybe a little weaker, but I'm just going to give it a try. I would highly recommend waiting, build up your experience, work on your GPA, build up on those umbrella skills, whatever you feel you need to be the most competitive applicant that you can be. All right, I'm going to transition to talking about reapplicants. So if you are someone who has applied to vet school in the past, everything I just talked about still sticks. However, a couple additional things that as a reapplicant that you need to think about. Number one, what have you done since your last application? They're going to want to see growth. So if there was an area of your application that was weak, they're going to want to see that you've done significant work on that area. So being reflective to say, what have I done since my last application? How have you changed and strengthened your application? This is likely going to be a question you're going to be asked, whether it's through the school-specific essays or in your interview. Most schools at this point will ask if you've applied in the past, and if so, how have you changed or strengthened your application, or how have you grown as a person or an applicant? So you need to make sure that you've shown growth, and significant growth. You need to be a different applicant the second time. Okay, that's going to mean getting feedback on your past personal statement, explanation statement, and essays, and updating all of those. You cannot resubmit the same essays. Those should be updated based on your new experiences, your new academics, whatever it is that you worked on in that time between your last application and this application. You have to present yourself as a different applicant than you were that first time. So as a reapplicant, these are some questions that I would be asking, and making sure that you have solid growth in the different areas of your application before I would encourage you to apply. Okay. Resources. This is a very cumbersome process, and there's a lot of small intricacies about the application and the application process. And I think it can often be helpful for applicants to use resources and get the help they need to present as the strongest applicant that they can be. Your college pre-health advisors are great resources for this. Definitely use them. Galin Education, we have a whole team of graduate pre-health advisors. We help with the pre-application things, experiences, school list, all components of your application. We review essays, we do mock interviews. The AAVMC Loop Abroad is a great program if you're looking to get vet-related experience, either here in the US or abroad. They have some very unique opportunities. The VEMSAR, which I already talked about earlier, to use their directory, the general info table, prerequisite chart. These are all things that you want to be using and looking into as you create your school list. And then always, always, always default to school websites and admissions offices. I often get questions like, will this class count for this prerequisite? I always refer my students to the admissions offices at the schools that are in question because one school may accept it and another may not. So always default to the specific schools that you're applying to with questions like that. Attend the info sessions. Several schools will ask in their supplemental applications, did you attend an info session? Okay, that shows interest, right? Not only are you learning more about the school, about their mission, about their vision, about things that are going on at the school, it also just is a way for you to show interest up front. Attending school-specific events can also be a great idea. Meet admissions. These are all important steps to be taking as you're thinking about applying. So I know I covered a lot of information here today in a pretty short amount of time. If you have questions or you're interested in applying or working with an advisor, please reach out. You can email info@galined.com and schedule your free 30-minute applicant assessment where we can talk. We'll kind of assess where you're at with things and give you some information and steps to move forward. I hope this presentation was helpful for you today. I hope you got something out of it. As always, please feel free to reach out if you have questions.